I did. I went to see Ricky Lee Jones at the Birdland Jazz Club in Manhattan, which I don't know if you remember. I only went, I mean, she had some hit kind of jazzy pop songs. I don't know what age I was, but something that thrilled me even more than seeing her was Ron Carter. I don't know if you're a jazz person, but probably the most famous jazz bassist in the world. You know, played Miles, Coltrane, you know, everybody, you know, hundreds of albums. And he was there, and I went over and talked to him. I felt like a little kid. I was like so happy. The thing that was definitely very clear, and so sometimes I even wonder if I'm seeing dead people and I don't even know, because sometimes, like this time, I knew this person wasn't alive anymore because it was my grandfather who passed away shortly before that, and I was in a movie theater in Manhattan, and I was sitting like on the side of the theater, like in the 10th row, and I saw this person from the back in the front row, and my grandfather was a unique looking guy. He always wore a cowboy hat and a really nice suit, and he was big. So he was like 6'3", but also really big, you know, more weight than he probably wanted to. So, and I thought, wow, that really looked like him. And it was on you. Nowadays in New York City, if you saw someone in a cowboy hat, you wouldn't think it's so strange, but back in those days. But he didn't have the cowboy hat on when I saw him, but it was sitting next to him. And I walked around front, and it was him. And I didn't even know what to do. I just walked right by him. I thought it for a second. I was with my brother. I said, "Did you see Pop in the front row there?" And he just said no. And I don't, you know, just that I didn't totally freak out about it or, you know, make that big a deal about it, I guess was a foreshadowing of my comfort with all that kind of stuff. I had other things happen when I was younger. Again, you know, when you're young, people just dismiss your imagination, but looking back, I saw there were these little beings that would be around me sometime. They looked like little babies that were around me, you know, flying around basically. Yeah, almost like cherubs kind of thing. Well, I had been living in Colorado in the United States, and I came back to the Northeast with my roommate, who also his family lived in Westchester, New York, and we drove back to visit the family and everything. And when I wonder even how we found out about it, but we found out there was a party. You know, this was before cell phones, before internet, and everything was talking on the phone. And so we went to this party. So we drove back. He went to his family's house. I went to mine. I borrowed my mom's car. It was a Ford Bobcat, these little cars, and we went to the party. We were drinking, smoking pot back in the 70s, or, you know, part of normal life for me. And so it was kind of funny because there was a young lady at the party who I kind of liked, and but the party, I mean, the house was crowded with music and, you know, really having a good time. And I kind of pretended that I was too high, or I thought I was pretending to, and so I could leave my car there and go back and flirt with her the next day. And so had my friend drive me back, but almost at my parents' house I realized my sister needed my mom's car the next day, so I said, "Drive me back to the party." He protested a little bit. I explained I was kind of acting like I was higher than I thought I was. He drove me back. I went in and told the young lady, I mean, she was my age, now she's a young lady to me, but and I do remember going in to tell her that, and then I remember walking towards the door. Again, the house was really crowded, so it was kind of working through a crowd. People were dancing and everything, and you know, I still have that vision in my mind, and it was a little too colorful and a little hazy, like when you drink too much and you're a little too high. So now, if I was ever like that, I would not drive. But no, you didn't really think about it back in those days. People were driving drunk all the time. But the next thing I remember, I don't even remember actually walking out of the house. I'm kind of getting a glimpse of it now, and I wonder at some point I probably will remember. But then I was out of my body, looking. I was in the white light. It was nighttime out, and I was looking. The car was smashed so much that you wouldn't think the person survived in there. My body was leaning against a tree like this, leaning, and my legs were out, and a cop was crouching over me. In my experience, again, it was dark down there. It was all white here. Behind me, there was a big circle of white, a different shade, and within there was like a silhouette of like a full body silhouette of a man, it looked like, with another shade of white radiating off of it. The time, I don't know how long it was. It felt like there was no time. The feeling of it was really the thing that really impressed me. Like, it was just this, always trying to figure it out, but this loving, warm, like, even I say it, this energy starts to come in. It's like being outside. I live near the beach, like being on the beach on the perfect temperature day, where you feel it on your skin. And again, I don't know how long it was. Everything seemed to make sense. It was like I looked at the car, it was fine. My head was smashed open, it was fine. And then the being behind me said, "You have to go back. Your father wants you to stay." Again, it seemed fine. Sometimes people say, "Could you say no?" I didn't even, like, everything just seemed so perfect. The world there, everything. I went back in my body and came 2-3 days later in the hospital. It just felt like, I don't know, see, I say it and like it's almost like the air stands still around me, and that's what it was like. So when I try to think of that, it just, my mind expands, my energy expands, my heart expands, and that's like, then it's like your question, it doesn't even matter. So it's a different perception totally. I knew when he said, "Your father wants you to stay," that the father was God, not my physical father. That love, that, the feeling that I had there, the closest thing to it is the love for my daughter. I get a similar feeling when I think about her. This was in 1976, no internet, I never heard a near-death experience, knew nothing about it. I had read autobiography Yogi, but really my thinking about it was more Star Trek than Yogananda. Another really cool, it still happens, I just meet people. So something happened. So I went back to Colorado after I was somewhat physically better. My mom convinced me and bribed me to come back east and work in my dad's company. I was sitting in my apartment and someone knocked on the door. Again, now if someone doesn't text ahead of time, I assume it's an Amazon package or, something like that. And there was this beautiful woman at the door, and she said her sister was someone I knew in Colorado, who's one of the people I mentioned my experience to. And I could mention my near-death experience, but I wasn't even using those words. This woman said, "I heard some cool things about you, and I want to introduce you to someone who teaches about what happens after we die." And she introduced me to this Sufi sheikh, and then I started to learn about it. So when I started researching was after that. Like, I didn't even know enough to research. I didn't know what to make of it at all. Anytime I had some friends that I mentioned it to that were no longer my friends. They just thought it was totally crazy. Sufis are the the metaphysical branch of the Islamic religion. He was a teacher, an Islamic teacher and the Sufis they're different sects of that also, and he was of the Mevlevi dervishes, and they follow the teachings of Jalaluddin Rumi. So Rumi, the poet that, has a lot of little poems, he's also written books, and he was a spiritual teacher. The being was not familiar to me. So one thing is, the being was behind me, and I was looking this way, and it never crossed my mind. A couple of years ago, someone said, "So you could see behind you." I wouldn't even put it that way. I just kind of knew what was there. It just was a totally white, no features or anything. So the Sufi sheikh, I was born in a Jewish family, this is an Islamic teacher. Right away he started to talk to me about Mary and Jesus. And when he did, he talked about Mary's openness to God, of letting in the Christ energy, And I said, that described what I felt. That, okay. Then he started talking about Jesus, like, whoa, that being behind me was Jesus. And that's when I, that rings true to me, and still to this day, when I say that, there's something kind of giddy inside of me, and I feel this energy, and that's, I didn't, again, nowadays, it's in TV shows. I mean, you have was this going on in the 19th? Probably some, but it wasn't like all over the place, you know what I mean? The part of that we can't describe, that loving, is probably the thing that's, well, I haven't talked to anyone, but I mean, I've read some things online where people have dark experiences in their near-death experience. I never spoke to anyone, but it seems like even those people come out of it knowing about this love. And the closest thing, the love of our children, I would say, on this planet is probably the closest thing to that. The biggest thing that happened is I had no idea what happened, and I needed to find out. So, and I started with this Sufi sheikh, and he started calling me a sensitive, and I really learned a lot from him, even beyond. But it's, I don't know, not that, I mean, over the years, sometimes I get like a hit, like, oh, wow, I'm realizing something now, and I was kind of shown that in my near-death experience. I just didn't get it. So, how to meditate better, even the healing stuff. But I think the part of not knowing was really a gift for me, because I've learned so much, It seems like some people have the near-death experience and it's the end-all answer to them. To me, it's more like the question. And still, there's more. And I know that there's more for me to learn. And so I try to find teachers that know more. That seems to be the quickest way. So, I study, but those are books and stuff. And the part of not knowing, I think, was really the biggest thing for me. It definitely seems way more common now. It's almost like fashionable. So I don't know what percent of people have it. I read things on Facebook in the groups all the time. Sometimes people say, oh, I was, declared dead, and they didn't have a near-death experience. So, but I also wonder if, my memory of what happened is just a limited part of it. So I think each person kind of gets what they need to get, and sometimes I say, if I was paying it, like I had that thing of seeing my grandfather, I had other spiritual experiences. If I was paying attention, I wouldn't have had to crack my head open, to like a knock in the head to get on track here. Yeah, when I work with people, I really get in that space, and it's kind of easy to look at their life in that way, but it's interesting, because then when I'm not working, it's not quite the same, but even then I can think about things in my life that might disturb me, or, we're talking about our kids. If, anything's wrong with my kids, it's like, I got to take care, something in me kind of panics like that. Well, when the teacher talked to me about Mary and Jesus, it was like a shift like this, because again, I did not know what to make of it, but it was just this white light was there, and like, oh, I know what that is. And it kind of gave me more permission to connect into it. So just knowing, so this teacher had a near-death experience, and a lot of his other students did also. So it was like a group and we didn't even use that word. We studied the Tibetan Book of the Dead. There was this book about death by this guy, E.J. Gold, who was kind of a crazy teacher who was very wise, but kind of wild and crazy kind of thing. And it just, when he talked about that, it just really opened up, and I really became very dedicated at that point. Yes, it was this thing that clicked in. It was like, oh, wow, it just made sense. And it almost gave me permission to look there again, because before that, I don't know, I didn't even feel okay talking to anyone about it. Well, the feeling, yes. And during meditation, during my work, I've learned and studied a lot, and to be able to do that. So, but that's an interesting idea, to even try to go back and remember more. Sometimes I wish I could remember more of what happened, because it seemed like the change in me was way bigger than the experience that I remember. The meditation I do, it's called soul travel, so it's a little different, but it's traveling at a different level than astral. Yeah. So the HU chant, H-U. I actually have some meditations on my YouTube channel. One that's basically what I do, called the basic soul meditation that people can learn how to do for themselves. Yeah. So it's some focusing, you call in the light. Usually I ask for the light of the Christ, but not always. And then focus on your breathing, doing the chanting, and then listening, and then the sound comes in. Sometimes it's like a buzzing, sometimes it's just more like a sound, and you listen to that sound, and it kind of pulls you into the spirit. I learned a lot from teachers after. Like, there's a part of like direct transmission from the teachers that is really quite profound. And then I can do that with other people. Sometimes what happens is my mind won't shut up and the sound starts to come in anyway, and then it reminds me, oh, I can let that in, and this buzzing feeling gets all over my body. Sometimes when I can quiet my mind, there's the sound, and you kind of listen into the sound, and then it kind of lifts, and it's just happening now. So I'm kind of used to doing it when I'm talking on the computer, because that's how I work, and then it connects me into this energy, and it's like all this information comes in. Sometimes it's knowing things about people. Sometimes, like right now, it just looks like these math equations that are being calculated there, and I'm not sure what that means. But I know I really like math, and it kind of makes sense to me, because it seems like it's the only thing that there's a definite answer to. You know, everything else in the world is, there's opinions about it. There's something going on where it calculates, and it does seem like it's helping people heal when I see that, like lining up things inside of them also. Most people come to me because they want to feel better, either emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, but physically also. But yeah, I mean, I see some interesting things. This one woman that came to me, and it was interesting. She didn't tell me that. I mean, she told me some of the troubles in her family, and I just saw there was a lot of witchcraft, negative witchcraft energy around her and her family. And I thought that was very interesting, and I thought it was pretty cool that she had the wherewithal to come to someone like me without even knowing that part of it. She just had an attraction when she saw me, on YouTube. Everything was forgiven. Like, there was no process to have to go through. It was just everything was love and forgiveness, and I was good. Everyone who I didn't like was good. Everything was good. My family, the dilemmas, 20 years old, there's a lot going on in your head about life and stuff. It just, everything was okay. In this physical reality, that's what people need to do when you're judging someone else. And I tell my clients that all the time. Really, you got to look for what you need to forgive yourself about. Jesus was all about forgiving, and it even when you're saying bestowing upon, it was just like here, and then everything was okay. Nothing had to be done. Even saying I knew everything, that like there would be a need to know. And so it's so hard to describe. It's almost like it's like breathing. You don't really think about breathing very much, or something that's just part of who you are that you don't really think about. Just like everything is good, and there's this thing in your heart that is. So when I'm working, I can see that in people right away. It's like, oh, and then I can see, well, this is in the way of them knowing that. And then how do you get them to know that? And within there's usually healing on so many different levels. That's what it is. It's more like just knowing and being a part of it. It definitely was not like observing, and it wasn't quite like thinking. Okay. Again, when Jesus said you have to go back, your Father wants you to say, it was just like, well, of course. And even of course is too much, because it just, it's, just think of something that you just know that is so true, you don't even think of it. You know what I mean? Right. So that's what it was like. And even I say that, and my heart starts to expand, and part of me is almost like could get to tears, and it's just so beautiful and so wonderful that it is, and everyone says this, and that's part of the description. There's no way to put it into words, and people go, I know. You love them so much you can't even explain it. And even to them, I say to my daughter, think of the thing you love the most in the world and then multiply it times 1,000,000. Then you might have some idea how much I love you. My belief is there's more than one part of us, and some of us, like our soul, takes a longer time to reincarnate. What I call the basic self reincarnates pretty quickly. Your question again is coming from the physical level, where there might be a thought of not wanting to be here. But from our spiritual part, it's like this is like a playground, and it's like being in a movie, and you come watch, and then our spiritual part of us can observe the movie from inside without our conscious self even kind of knowing about it, which is kind of funny. So when we finish, it's kind of graduating from school, and then at some point we get to graduate, but I don't think the part of us that the part of us that we're talking about has a choice in the matter. How I describe it, there's a timeline in spirit. So when I'm looking, so a lot of times when I work with people, I see things that are from past lives. And the purpose is to clear things up in this lifetime, and then by seeing that, sometimes there are things in the future to clear, very rarely, but once in a while. So it is kind of like seeing a future life in a certain way. There's no way to prove any of this. I just get a feeling about it and see what I see, and when the person gets, especially if it's a physical thing and they get better, there's no denying it. Someone feeling better, it could just be hearing a silly story makes them feel better, but I've just had so many experiences where what I do really helps people sometimes make more money, lose weight, fix relationships or leave relationships. I see this line, and there are all these things along it, and I call them past lives, but even when I say it, doesn't matter. If it moves something inside of you and heals the person, that's what matters to me. My experience, what works is to introduce them, use your imagination to introduce them to a saint. So usually Jesus is the first one to try, or it could be from the religion the person was born into. And they might not believe that, but, usually when I'm doing something like that, I'm talking to my client, and they're asking me about one of their past relatives. So the client might not feel any connection to the religion they were born in, but there's part of, we're just connected. And the way I describe it is having those saints is like a path to God, whatever you believe. Sometimes I talk to people and they're like, oh, I'm just spiritual. I say, yeah, but you got to kind of believe in something to connect really into the spirit. And usually it's through a saint. So, so where I live is there are ferries from here that go to, South Street Seaport. And so in this area, a lot of people passed away at 9/11. So that was something that caused a lot of spirits to be around that, like out of nowhere, weren't really prepared to transition on. So, right. Yeah. But sometimes that happens, and sometimes it is just, and the thing is, you can just go down a list and try. If you guess the wrong one, it doesn't really matter, but when you find the right saint, so it could be Jesus, Abraham, Moses, Muhammad, and, Buddha, all these things, and you just check with that. And then for me, I just feel this thing lifting, and I see things in my mind. Again, there's no way to prove what it is, but I've learned to trust what I see. No, you don't have to have a belief system. That's the thing. Okay. Sometimes it just clicks with the words, and it's... Okay. Sometimes people come to me, they don't believe in what I do at all, and they get better. So it's not that. And don't... And, you're in a field where you can... Well, why don't you kind of assume that you believe it and assume that it's real? It's not going to hurt anybody, and it just helps you step into the energy a little bit more, and it helps. I had someone come to me about actually their son, and it was kind of cool because the son was in a very high place. And he was a very loving, I didn't know him, but, from her and the friend who referred her to me, he was in a, he lived a good life. He died in a tractor accident on a farm. Just everyone liked him, didn't do any religious or spiritual stuff, but he had a life not too far in the past where he was like an Indian, Sikh, and so he came in a very high place to experience kind of a humble life, which was kind of interesting. So So it goes the other way sometimes too, where sometimes people are lost, but sometimes their people are higher than you'd think from how they live their life. What I've seen is different things. So sometimes people ask me about their past loved ones, and the person is they're not, almost not even aware that they passed away. And they're like someone who would be like a hard worker. They're just doing the thing they were doing here. And it is kind of like sending some light to them to remind them. There's, again, our spiritual part. You can compare it to when your kids are real young and you're looking them and they're doing something, and sometimes they're doing things they don't even know what it is, and they're just mimicking other things they've seen. And from that place of pure loving, that's what our spiritual part looks like. So I think the thing you just explained, the person would have to have a certain spiritual awareness. So my experience is I don't see people in a lower place. When they have the awareness, they could go higher. But I see people get stuck in all sorts of different levels on the way, and it just sometimes, it's kind of like praying for them and then holding that energy there and asking for the saint in the way that I said. And then, I mean, some of it could be from my near-death experience. I can just see this glorious thing in people, whether they're physically alive or not. And then it's like, oh, then that glorious thing is what God is, and that's in everyone, and there's a connection there. Start to feel a lot of energy in my body.
Yeah.
I don't think it comes through me to them, but it is, because I work with people all over the world. It's like they're right there, and this energy comes in for them. There's so many different kinds of connections, and usually, anything and anybody in your life that's important to you, there's something from another lifetime that connects you. And the people that are really close to you, you've had many past lives with, definitely. So I'm not afraid of being dead. I'm definitely not looking forward to dying, unless I just go to sleep and wake up in that other realm. But so I get to experience that a lot. Like I said, when I'm working, it kind of clicks in like that. I do meditate every day. Journal writing is really helpful too to get, and there are other spiritual exercises I do that are, to me, it's just connecting to God and that love, and that's what I dedicate my life to. And I definitely don't do it perfect, and I don't think anyone can, because we're here in the physical world to work through our karma, so it's kind of designed that we can't get around that. So one thing I want to mention, I do house clearing. So the things you're talking about in houses, they're definitely there. There are definitely things there's all sorts of different types of, and I just say general spiritual beings, because some of them are very negative, some are very positive. Well, I don't do it over the internet. I usually, when I do it, so first what I'll do is spend a certain amount of time just doing what I can do, and then I'll check a little bit each day for a number of days after to see if something comes up. She said, can you do a house clearing? I go, yeah. So she said, I have 2 houses, and then she said, do you need the address? I said, I don't really need the address. You just need to tell me something about the house. It doesn't, and then, but when she gave me the address of the first house, this purple light just went whoosh, and the clearing was done right away. I didn't do anything that I was aware of.
Really?
And then the cool thing was she got an offer for the house the next day. She didn't tell me this, and I didn't find out for quite a while. They've been trying to sell this house for years, and it didn't sell. And all of a sudden I did that. The other house took a little more work, and then I just couldn't quite get what it was. And I said, I need to go there and look at it. And so I went there, and I saw basically that house had too much bright white energy around it, and the rest of the neighborhood was not like that, so it was kind of freaking people out when they went there. So I had to kind of tone the energy down a little, like that wasn't a negative thing. But sometimes I see, there was this house I cleared, they're having a lot of plumbing problems, and there are these things called elementals that go in the earth and with underground water, and something was off with the elementals. And elementals they're not positive, they're not really negative, but they're we can ask them to help us, and they will. They kind of have to. And so I did what I needed to do, and it lined things up with the elementals, and then miraculously, like in a week, the plumbing problems were fixed that had been going on there for a really long time. Those things are just so cool. We're trying to think about something that's unthinkable. So some of the people you're mentioning, like I said, the negative powers come in and really take over that person. So that's the thing, and they're not. It's not even them. Like Hitler was not. That was just the evil coming in, really, and a lot of things like that it is. So. But yes, there's karma where you have to learn stuff, but it's hard. I mean, I don't even know how to put some of it into words, because some things do seem to be balancing something from another lifetime that you're doing something. But if you're stuck in that negative loop, you still want to get past it. You don't want to, living with that, just imagine living in that negative place. No matter, how terrible that must be. You know what I mean? So in a certain way, that doing that and living that would be its own punishment. Yes, I get to see some of the demons and the entities. Those are the negative. There's a lot of different negative things. Luckily, the positive things can win out in most cases, but it is sometimes, when it's like in a movie, it's obvious. When it's the subtle thing and it slowly happens, and then all of a sudden something's really off, and then you could look back and compare it to like having a piece of furniture. When you get it, it's new, it starts getting old right away. And then all of a sudden, 10 years later, wow, this looks old. But, 9 years later, so it's kind of like, these things start to affect you, and then it can really mess you up. It could be a matter of semantics, but when I say who you are and you and me, that good part is what I'm referring, but there are other parts to us, some that are, kind of in the middle, and then the negativity comes in, but I don't think of people as that negativity. It comes, and there are demons, there's the devil, there's all these, things, Lucifer, these negative things in spirit that come in, and they're kind of looking for openings in us when we're caught in the negative thoughts and anger and these negative emotions, and then they'll just kind of sneak in. There is kind of an opening, and, that's why we want to live a good life, be of service, take care of our kids. Well, my website is lawrencebrock.com. So there's links to my YouTube on there, TikTok, there's my email, there's an appointment scheduling thing on there. That's the easiest way. People can text or message me on WhatsApp at my phone number, 732-567-6388. My YouTube is Dr. Lawrence Brock. Those are great ways to get in touch with me. Yeah, there's a lot of great videos on my YouTube of interviews have done, classes I've taught, some of my techniques and meditations are on there. Yeah, I'm in the middle of a forgiveness thing myself, where there's some people I'm having trouble forgiving, and I read this thing about, even when you have trouble forgiving, it's like, so one of the things that Jesus Christ brought in is the forgiveness, and it just to think of it in that way, like, there is like a higher power that can forgive beyond what we can forgive. And when you can start like, oh man, I just need to let it go, I'm humanly not capable of doing some of these things. And when you can hand it over to God, your higher power, whatever you think of in that way, it's really helping me the last couple of days to get over some of my judgments about a couple of people.